Petrone. I'm the social jockey for Calliope Games, and I am here with Brendan Hansen, the designer of Enchanted Plumes, one of the games that's featured in our Calliope Game Night Extravaganza, launching on Kickstarter on November 10th. Brendan, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Risa. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am enjoying all of the sun in sunny Savannah. Not missing the fall at all. Doing great. How about you?
Yeah, I'm, completely the opposite. Located in New Haven, Connecticut, so it's chilly, but I am loving the chill in the air. The leaves are turning, and it's just gorgeous. So it's a
Awesome.
perfect time for games.
It is a perfect time for, it's always a perfect time for games, right? So
Yep.
speaking of, tell me a bit about Enchanted Blooms.
Yeah, so Enchanted Plumes is my second game. It is a sort of it's really hard. It sort of exists outside of definitions in some ways, but fundamentally, it's a numbers on cards game where players turn over turn sort of construct these magical peacocks in front of them, row by row, as they add feathers, trying to build out an entire peacock. And there's elements of push your luck, of hand management. I think it's the sort of game that will appeal to anyone who loves classic card games, but it's not a classic card game.
No, it is not at all. I was trying to describe it to a friend of mine. I was like, well, it's kind of like set collection, but it's also like press your luck, and there's a bit of like take that to it. Do you find that there's a certain type of audience that gravitates towards that game?
Hmm. So that's a really interesting question. I've played this game with my family. I've played this game with my gaming friends, and it really I think appeals to everyone. So, as you mentioned, there's little pieces of lots of sort of different ethoses of games that exist within the game. So I found that different groups can really latch on to different aspects. It's a game that you can play very casually, or it's a game that you can get very competitive with, and there's lots of room in that whole spectrum to play and enjoy it. So I haven't necessarily found it works really well for family game nights, and it works really well for my friends who want to sit at the table, or with my wife, who's like the most competitive person that I know, and really try to grind each other out and win as much as possible.
I completely agree. I find that this game works for people who don't play a lot of games and for people who do. They just play it very differently, and there is nothing wrong with that. I don't know what you're talking about being super competitive. That's definitely not at all. I don't know what you're talking about. Can you take us through the design process of this? Like, what got you started and why peacocks?
I, interestingly enough, sort of was thinking, could you? Peacocks are so beautiful, so I was thinking, could you make a game around peacock courtship? Is that like something that you could make the whole ritual because peacock's feathers are so beautiful? So from there, I really got to the core scoring system and building row by row, where you start in the first row of cards that you build sets the base for your peacock and how large it will be. And the first row of cards is negative, and then everything else in your peacock following that first row as it pairs down to the single last card that you play is positive. So that those two things really came at the same time. And then the game, I've never designed a game that came as quickly, or I think as, I won't say effortlessly, but it felt like I was just getting out of the way of the design. So many of the pieces of this game just fell into place.
How do you find that the game plays with like two players versus four
Hmm.
or even six players? How does the gameplay change?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So it definitely changes because the cards per player varies. So the amount that you can be ambitious changes. But I do think that that's one adjustment that players generally have to make is sort of you get a sense the more you play for how much time is left in the game. Obviously, the peahen plays into that some too, but the player count can affect it as well. So I definitely when I haven't played at a higher player count in a while, I have to remind myself you have to roll in your ambition a little bit. You can't be quite as ambitious with what you're trying to do. But it's fun too because at the higher player counts, you get to have higher value cards that you're playing with. So that gives even more reward to your risks. So that's exciting also.
Yeah, absolutely. I found the putting the cards in and out of the pool becomes a lot more strategic with the higher player counts because you're seeing what everyone's going for and you have to keep track of it. And I have
Yep.
a hard enough time keeping track of my own plans. So there has definitely been moments where I put down a card and go, oh no, I shouldn't have done that, and just handed points to somebody else. So
Totally. There's that element also in two-player games where there's a chance a card that you put down could come back to you, and that's definitely there in higher player counts, but it's so much more risky. Yeah.
yep. Do you have any strategies or suggestions for players or ways that you tend to play?
Really, I think the game is as much about being efficient as it is about getting cards in the right spot. So I would say don't feel too much pressure to always play two cards on your turn. When you play your cards matters as much as how many you play. And then also, you don't have to finish your peacocks until the final turn of the game. So it's okay to spread yourself widely so long as you think you can finish them.
We've talked a bit about Enchanted Plumes, but tell me a bit about you. What got you into game design in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So I've loved my games my entire life. I grew up with grandparents who loved playing games, so games have just always occupied a special place in my heart and in my brain. I flirted with modern board games. I played Catan in high school, but then sort of didn't take that one step further into the whole world of modern games until 2013. I was walking around Corvallis, Oregon, and walked into a friendly local game store where the store owner so generously said, "There's this game. I think you would really like it. A game of Matt Leacock's Pandemic." And my mind was totally blown. I was like, "Oh, this is incredible." And it made me realize that I could design games and there was an audience in the world who would want to play them.
What was your process for getting that first game designed and set up with the publisher?
It was very exciting, long, laborious, lots of learning. There was so much learning involved, which I loved. I loved discovering new things. Eventually, it spanned sort of three states. I got connected with a local design group here in New Haven that was fantastic with some individuals who have really deep ties in the board game community. So I sort of got hooked up with them, and they sort of walked me through what the most intelligent way of going about trying to get your game signed might be, and they were just instrumental in helping me find people who might be interested in publishing some of my games.
That's fantastic. I've found too the board game community is very helpful to each
Yes.
other. They have each other's backs, and that's so great. What made you choose Calliope as your publisher for Enchanted Plumes?
I felt so lucky to be chosen by Calliope. I think Calliope was like the perfect publisher imaginable for Enchanted Plumes. I love Calliope's ethos of creating games that create lasting memories because that's so much about what I love about games in general. I also think that I just admire some of their games so much, like Suro and a lot of the games in the Titan series I think are incredible. So I was thrilled because I thought I was in good company, and I think a lot of Calliope's games play two to some high number of people. Like I think of Suro. Enchanted Plumes fits with that very well, playing 2 to 6 players. And I don't know. I just think that the type of games that Calliope likes to make really matches up with what Enchanted Plumes is. And I knew also that they were gonna in putting the art together for the game just hit it out of the park, and I think they did. The feather cards are spectacular and beautiful, and Echo Chernick, the game's artist, did a really good job.
It's so beautiful. It's a type of game where you want to like just play with it, even when you're not playing, just seeing what you can come up with and color combinations. I'm not saying that I've absolutely not put a color down because it doesn't fit the aesthetic of the peacock, but I've thought about it.
Totally.
At the end of the day, I'm too competitive to do that, but I would. So your BGG profile says that you subsist almost entirely off of card games. What makes card games so appealing to you?
I'm endlessly fascinated by cards. I think cards are the perfect piece. They're almost, by all accounts, over 1,000 years old, the playing card. And I think we're not even close to scratching the bottom, or maybe even, I think we're close to scratching the surface. The bottom, the end of things that we can do as designers with cards. Cards also just the second you add cards to a game, cards, are fundamentally about communicating information and also obfuscating it. And I think that puts card games in such a rich play space instantly. I think that when you play a game like Enchanted Plumes, there's this sort of it's not real nostalgia because most people have not played Enchanted Plumes before, but this sort of almost like faux nostalgia for a game that you've never played before, which I love. I think cards are really cool in that sense, and not many other types of games can give you that sort of breadth as a designer.
Why should people back the Calliope Game Night Extravaganza?
Yeah, I think that people should back the Calliope Game Night Extravaganza because there's three incredible games in them that will align to give you a fantastic game night. And they're all three card games, but they're all three very different card games. And I think that That's really cool to sort of have this investment in a game night to come in your future. That's fun. They're beautiful. The games are interesting. And I think that there's just a lot of fun waiting to be had. This has been really lovely. It's great to meet
Yeah,
you. And
it's great to
thanks
meet you
for,
as well.
yeah, asking questions about the game. It's really fun. So,
Yeah, this is
yeah.
awesome. You are lovely to talk to. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, you can check out Enchanted Plumes as part of the Calliope Game Night Extravaganza, launching on Kickstarter on November 10th. Thank you so much for watching.